Welcome to this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on research methods, looking at questionnaires. Questionnaires are a versatile research method that are often used by sociologists to assess people's attitudes, behaviours and motivations. They are a list of questions that are distributed by sociologists through a variety of different channels to people taking part in research called respondents. These questionnaires can be used to measure many different social issues and ascertain people's opinions, attitudes, tastes and preferences. Some questionnaires are mailed out to respondents either through the postal service or via email or direct into an external website. Other methods of distribution include researchers completing the questionnaire with a respondent in a similar way to a structured interview. A final way of distributing questionnaires is to allow respondents to take the questionnaire away and complete in their own time. These are often referred to as self-completion questionnaires. Questionnaires have several different formats based upon the types of questions being asked. Closed questions are those with a fixed number of responses, such as yes, no, or a Likert scale, which provides responses with a statement and asks if they strongly agree, disagree, etc. Others can be multiple choice, but closed questions are usually pre-coded so that they can be turned into quantitative data to give an overview of people's responses. These questionnaires are particularly useful for finding out people's attitudes to issues or their intended behaviours. The second form of questioning is open questioning. These questions are designed to allow the respondent to provide their own unique answer to a question, one that produces more contextual, qualitative data that explains the meanings and motivations of people, allowing researchers to understand why people act the way they do. In recent times, there has been a trend for combining these two types of questions, gathering quantitative data on opinions and asking follow-up questions to understand the motivations behind the response. In the exams, students are often asked about written questionnaires or self-completion questionnaires. These descriptions are suitably vague to allow better students to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of using open or closed questions, rather than making assumptions about what type of questions are used. Questionnaires are used regularly in the social sciences and have many advantages. They're relatively cheap and quick to produce, so they can be distributed widely with minimal costs. They are less intrusive than other methods such as interviews and observations, as they don't take up much of the respondent's time and can be done at their leisure. The potential scale of questionnaires, particularly if online, can increase the representativeness of the method, with large-scale distribution possible. And finally, questionnaires are commonplace in society, being used frequently by businesses to gauge customer satisfaction, so respondents have a good idea of what to expect and how to respond. They're more familiar with this method than, say, interviews or observations. However, questionnaires do have practical, ethical and theoretical issues that researchers have to take into account. They have quite a low response rate, which means they can become expensive and time-consuming to administer if only a small percentage of questionnaires are being returned. Researchers also need to be careful in designing their questionnaires to make sure that the questions they write are not leading to a specific conclusion or too ambiguous for respondents to understand. This is particularly a concern, as often no researcher will be present to clarify any issues. Furthermore, closed questionnaires have an imposition problem, insofar as researchers decide the number of responses that a respondent can choose from, limiting their voice. Conversely, open questions can be incredibly time-consuming to analyse and do not guarantee the researcher any useful data if the respondent has not understood the question. Ethically, questionnaires do have a few issues, but certainly less than other methods. Questionnaires could cause potential distress to respondents, particularly if asking about socially sensitive topics such as parenting styles, domestic violence, or being the victim of crime. A disadvantage of questionnaires is that there is usually no researcher present to show empathy or to develop a rapport with or to help people affected by the questions that need to be asked. Many of the other ethical issues revolve around the recording of information. In line with GDPR regulations, questionnaires must be kept secure and away from potential exposure to others to protect the respondent's personal data. The content of the questionnaire may be sensitive, particularly if respondents are disclosing sensitive information about others or their employers, for example schools. For some topics, it is best to ensure that respondents are given anonymity, which may also help them to be more open with their responses. A final ethical issue is that questionnaires may disclose immoral or illegal activities. It may also disclose concerns over the well-being of the respondent, particularly if we look at mental health or pupils and education. And these are considerations researchers may take into account when conducting research using questionnaires. Theoretical issues with questionnaires vary depending upon the types of question being asked. Closed questions are lower in validity because they have a fixed number of responses, while open questionnaires may lack reliability because of the variety of responses people could potentially give, meaning if they are repeated, there is more chance of getting different results. Further consideration with questionnaires and validity is whether the researcher is actually getting the person's true opinion, or are they responding in a way they think the researcher wants them to. Of course, anonymity and the lack of a researcher present may encourage more honesty, but there is less certainty over the responses in a questionnaire format. And finally, both positivists and interpretivists have used questionnaires, but have preferences over the question types. Positivists prefer the quantitative data that closed questions provide, whilst interpretivists favour the qualitative data gained from open questions. Probably the most famous example of a questionnaire is the census, which is distributed to all households every 10 years and measures the social and economic background of the household. It has a high response rate because of the legal necessity to complete it, and this gives the census a prominent position in social research. Alice Sullivan examined the levels of cultural capital in children and their parents using questionnaires in our education module, and another good example of a survey is the Crime Survey of England and Wales, distributed to around 20,000 people each year. It is a victim report survey asking respondents if they have been a victim of crime in the past 12 months. That concludes this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on research methods focusing on questionnaires. Thanks for watching.